Hi everyone, it's good to be back. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the anti-gravity theme coming out of The Hunt for Zero Point, a few stories that came after the book was published which I thought one or two people might be interested in. We're going to talk about superconductors and anti-gravity experiments conducted by someone called Podkletnov, a Russian, and Ning Li, Chinese-American. I had the good fortune to meet them both, and I'm going to tell the stories of what happened to both of them because they're actually very interesting and curious. In 1996, the Daily Telegraph in London published a story about Podkletnov. Podkletnov was working at the University of Tampere in Finland, and he claimed he had managed to negate the force of gravity by 3%, 3 to 5% actually. It doesn't sound much, but actually it's a tremendous amount when you consider that the force of gravity, according to physics, shouldn't be negated by anything. But he said that he'd negated the force of gravity by using superconductors. Superconductors are materials that lose all resistance to electricity at low temperatures. There are some high temperature superconductors as well. And what Podkletnov found, he claimed by accident, was that if you placed an object in a beam above the superconductor, which sort of rotates like a, if you imagine it like a vinyl disc, if you place an object in that beam above it, what happens is that object loses weight by 3 to 5%. Again, science says that's impossible. Anyway, he went forward, NASA became interested, NASA set up a concepts office to look at this, and they were going to go ahead and test it. Cue to somebody called Ning Li. Ning Li, as I said, Chinese-American. She was working at the University of Huntsville in Alabama. And she also claimed that she had developed a similar system using superconductors that negated the force of gravity. So NASA is going to step in. Actually, Ning Li does get some US government money to go test this. And then some rather strange things start to happen. Now, in The Hunt for Zero Point, I talk about my meeting with Podkletnov. He not only claimed when I met him that he had negated the force of gravity, but that he had developed something called an impulse gravity generator, which was like a kind of force field, a beam that he could shoot out into space, and which would be capable, when weaponized, of knocking down satellites. And the beauty of this as a weapon was that the person or the object struck by this weapon system would never actually know what had hit them. So it was the ultimate kind of stealthy weapon system. Now, you'd think that someone who developed something like this, and he claimed that these experiments had been going on inside Russia, would have got no end of people beating a path to their door to sign them up, get them money, get this stuff developed. And I'm going to come back in a second to what happened when Boeing tried to beat a path to Podkletnov's door. But let's just go back to what happened with Ning Li. So Ning Li makes some progress in America under NASA supervision. Shortly after the publication of The Hunt for Zero Point, which was in, the American version was in 2002, Ning Li disappears off the face of the earth. In fact, as far as I'm aware, right now, no one knows where she is. The speculation is that she succeeded in developing this anti-gravity system, and she was either spirited into the American black world and somewhere, maybe out in the desert someplace, has developed a propulsion beam or a weapon system for the US Air Force or some branch of the US military, or she went back to her native China. Multiple people have tried to get in touch with her since 2003, which is around about the time frame she disappeared, and they have failed to do so, as far as I'm aware. I had the good fortune to meet Ning Li after the publication of The Hunt for Zero Point in 2003 at a conference in Washington, DC called the High Frequency Gravity Wave Conference. And she was an utterly charming woman who was totally dedicated to producing gravity-free energy for all. She didn't want it weaponized. She didn't want it bought by governments who would then suborn the technology for their own purposes. She wanted to give it as a gift to the people of the world. So where did she go? Now I'm going to cut to the Boeing story. In 2002, at around the time of the publication of the US edition of the Hunt for Zero Point, I came into possession of a set of documents. They were literally posted through my office door anonymously in a brown envelope, and when I opened it up, it was an internal briefing memorandum from Boeing, and it was called GRASP. And GRASP stood for Gravity Reduction for Advanced Space Propulsion. And basically what this memo was saying was that Boeing was going to spend about $100,000 of internal money testing the Podkletnov anti-gravity device. We published this in Jane's Defense Weekly. There was a huge hoo-ha. Boeing denied the story, said that it wasn't working on anti-gravity or anything like it. But of course I had the documents which said that they were looking at doing this. So it was a little bit disingenuous because they were looking to do this experiment and they were going to spend money on it. And I even had the name of the program manager, who was a guy called Jamie Childress, who was going to be in charge of this. Cut to a year later, when I was at an event at which I met Jamie Childress, and he advanced towards me looking slightly pissed off, saying, "You're the guy who got me my program cut." Well, cut a long story short, we had a drink or two, everything was fine. He calmed down and said, "Look, it wasn't your fault." But when that story came out in Jane's Defense Weekly, all the funding that had been allocated to this experiment and all the hoo-ha surrounding it meant that it was never ever going to get covered. So we sort of shook hands and went on our way. So that really is kind of the story of these mysterious superconductors and what happened after the Hunt for Zero Point. The two leading players, as I say, Podkletnov and Ning Li, I met, I talked to them. I have no doubt in my mind that Ning Li was a very serious player and her disappearance remains mysterious. And if anyone knows where she is, in fact, if Ning Li happens to see this, I would love to hear from her again. She signed actually a theoretical paper that she had written on her work, on the whole use of superconducting magnets and how to negate gravity. And it was a really beautiful inscription that she put on the bottom of it, which was, "I want to make this device work for all mankind." And I hope that wherever she is, she's achieved that, and to hear from her. But as I say, if anyone knows of where she is, I'd be delighted to hear from you too. And that's all till the next time. Thanks again for listening, and take care.